recorded live in a studio right next to an actual functioning chicken coop. It's the Indispensable Thursday Show with Sable and Dave.
Well, actually, Dave's not here this week. It's just me, Sable Cantus, musician and podcaster from Orange County, California, with my good friend and today's co-host, Rob English. Hi, Rob.
Greetings.
And Rob, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yes, I'm working on my independent future podcast called Plain English, and I've been a guest on the Sable and Dave show one prior time, and it was a good time was had by all. I'm a practicing attorney. I also have degrees in geography, economics, and psychology, and I'm just now starting a new degree program in space studies. So that's a little bit of, well, and a couple other things. I'm a military veteran, and yeah, that's about all that's interesting.
There's a lot more interesting about you, Rob, but we'll keep some of that off pod. Dave's going to be a little bit jealous. He's actually out right now working hard on our new podcast, What's This Movie Really About.com. That's going to launch as soon as we wrap up this next episode. And we're going to have a deep dive into all your favorite flicks. So what is The Fisher King really about?
Actually, I like that as a concept. I saw that you were going to do The Fisher King, but in general, I like that because I find myself glued to the internet when I see these things where it's there's some site that's like Honest Trailers, and they explain what the trailer is really saying and doing, and there's some other sites that do a similar thing. So I'm really interested in seeing you and Dave's take on movies and why they're basically so shitty nowadays.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll let you know as soon as that hits the iTunes and Android store or Google Play Store. So go ahead.
The Fisher King is not a new movie, so that'll be a good movie. You'll be telling people, no, this is a good movie that came out in the 90s. Maybe was Fisher King
1991.
There we go.
We're gonna do a mix: newer movies, older movies, and bring in some Hollywood folks. But I don't want to turn too much of the show about the new podcast. Go to whatsthismoviereallyabout.com. Keep an eye out. We're going to be launching next couple of weeks from today, which is, by the time you hear this, will be September 1st, 2016.
Very cool. Well, yeah, because you'll drag me into talking about movies, and I can do that all day. So let's focus on our topics.
Now, today with you, Rob, we're going to bring this special edition of the Thursday show, of the Indispensable Thursday show. We're going to bring a current events and potpourri show. Now, it is September 2016. We're in the middle of an election season, and I've never been more caught up in the ridiculousness of the news cycle, even though I know it's always been ridiculous.
It's getting worse and worse because the sheer volume of information that is thrown at people through the news, social media, internet exceeds even the 2012 elections, the 2008 elections. It just keeps growing and growing. You get it on your phone. They're going to start texting you the news as it comes out. You know, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump will be speaking directly to you by text. It's going to be crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, on that note, I got a text message from Hillary Clinton's buddy today. She's texted me twice. At 11 this morning, she said, "Hi, it's your friend Jess again. Want a free Hillary sticker? I've got you covered. Just click here." And it's an HRC link. And then today at 9 p.m., she said, "Hey, it's Jess. We're still about $2 million short of our goal for the month. Can you chip in by midnight so we don't fall behind?" I'm not going to chip in $2 million, by the way.
That's awesome. I can't understand why I'm still getting emails from Ted Cruz. I thought he dropped out of the race, so I'm trying to figure out why he's still emailing me. It's like a stalker.
But he still wants your money.
That's true.
Right? After the election, can't they just take all the money and go buy more houses and live large for a while?
Well, they have to account for all the residual money left after the end of a campaign. I'd have to check. I don't know what they have to do with it. They have to do something, though. There's some election law about that.
I think they have to pay their bills. You know, it's going to take them 5 or 6 years to get back into an office, so they got to live somehow.
Well, I don't think they get to go pay their personal bills.
I don't know. Bernie Sanders is starting a new lobbying outfit, but it's not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit lobbying, and he's using all his campaign money for it. And that's
well, yeah, because Sanders is one of those rare politicians. He's the oldest guy on the planet, and he has never had a private sector job in his entire life. He has been like a mayor and all sorts of stuff. He has been on the public dime pretty much his entire adult life. And he's old. He's 70 something.
Oh yeah, he's beat handily by some Republicans still in office who will probably still go run again.
Well, yeah, I don't know. He's up there. I mean, he hasn't always been a senator. He's been some other stuff, but he's consistently been on some public payroll since he started working.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with my dad recently. He's not in politics or anything, but as he's going through some medical conditions right now, we were just sitting. I was hanging out with him in the hospital room, and he said, "So what's it like to go into your office? What do you do in an office? Like you go in every day, right? You go into this office every day. What do you do there?" Well, see, my dad's never had a job in his whole life. He's always played music or he's taught music from his house.
Right. So he's had a collection of temporary gigs, basically. He's either going to go do a performance, he's going to go teach somebody every once in a while.
Oh no, he's made his living as a music teacher, as a book publisher, as an author. But he's never gone into an employer at a job at a desk every day, Monday through Friday.
See, but that's fine. I respect your dad because in essence, he's an entrepreneur in the field of music. He offers lessons, he offers performance, he does publishing. You know, he's basically a one-man small business. I have complete respect for that.
Yeah, but like Bernie Sanders, he's never had a public sector job.
Well, no. Actually, he has. Because your dad, in supporting himself throughout the years, basically has a product. His knowledge and education, or his musical skills, or his writing skills that he's selling privately. That is private sector.
Okay. The good argument.
Yep. Public sector is when our taxes are paying his salary. I'm pretty sure that taxes aren't paying the tuition of his music students.
That's probably correct.
So, no, your dad's he's a capitalist. I don't know if you should tell him that.
Well, I think it makes sense to make good arguments, and I can't understand the argument of some well-known athletes right now to not stand up and be proud of our country that we live in, the United States of America.
Oh yes, because we talked about this pre-show. You hit on my hot button of the week, which as
we didn't talk much on pre-show. I literally wanted to have one bullet so I could do an awesome segue like that.
That's pretty good. Yes, that is. I won't cuss excessively, but he's a small-minded, hypocritical individual. And for those out in the podcast world who don't actually have internet or have watched the news or anything, we're speaking, of course, of 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who has now made it a point not to stand during the playing of the national anthem at the beginning of 49ers football games. And his basis for this is he believes that he should not show respect for our nation because the country oppresses minorities at an institutional level, and therefore he can't respect it, so he's just going to sit down for the whole thing.
So why does he stay in the country?
Well, that's an interesting point. I actually saw I saw an interesting meme today that a friend of mine posted on Facebook that he said, "Oh, well, it's an example of white privilege." So what he said was, Colin Kaepernick says the country is not great, so people tell him to leave. Donald Trump says the country is not great. He runs for president, which, of course, incensed me a little bit because it was a false equivalency, one of those famed logic fallacies that we were discussing. Because if you think about it, Donald Trump, for right or wrong, he's taking a stance that he wants to make America great again. Which is the implication is that it's not as great as it once was and it's got some problems.
But he hasn't identified when it was great and for whom it was great at that time.
That's true, but and there's certainly some debate and discussion that can be had about those issues. But what can be said about Donald Trump is he is running for an office and actively seeking a position where he can make a difference, where
Right.
he can use his efforts and talents to restore the greatness. So I see that as a little bit different than someone who says, yeah, this country's not great, so I'm just going to sit down and disrespect the anthem. So it was a false equivalency in that you also come back to the fact that Colin Kaepernick, for saying that the country oppresses minorities, he's in a profession in which, statistically speaking, minorities do incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Minorities in the National Football League are heavily represented to a greater degree than their population demographic. So statistically, the United States of America has provided one of the most lucrative sports opportunities available to minorities, where they can make salaries that exceed any other opportunities anywhere else
Right.
in the world, because of the capitalist system and the freedom to contract and to engage in that.
Well, and according to Google, the NFL is currently 68% black.
Okay, yeah, and if you look at population statistics,
12%.
about 12-13%.
Yeah.
Approximately.
So I don't have a problem with somebody who says, like for example, you as a military veteran could decide that you don't want to stand up during the national anthem, and you could say, I don't think I should have to stand up. And I would say, you're right, you don't have to stand up. I stand up to show pride for my country because maybe it was drilled into me when I was in the U.S. Army. Maybe it was drilled into me as a student when I was in public school saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Or maybe I'm just proud that we live in the greatest country in the world and we don't have roving bands of hoodlums kidnapping and raping children that can't be stopped by the police. So, I stand up for those things. But if you said, Rob said, I'm not going to stand up, okay, that's fine. That's your right. But when this guy, Kaepernick, who first of all, as a public figure with a huge influence over the youth, when he says this ridiculous argument, he's not going to stand up, I think it does more harm to my country. I think it does more harm to our pride in our country than the statement that he's supposedly trying to make.
I have to 100% agree with you there, because on the one hand, I don't disrespect his right. I fully support his right. If any man, any free man in the United States, and we're all free in the United States, says, I want to stand up or I don't want to stand up. We're not a nation that says, hey, you stand up or, we're going to throw you in prison or something like that. No, it is your option. So what he's failing to recognize is that the country that he is maligning and the national anthem that he is disrespecting is what is protecting his right to disrespect it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a right granted to him even though he's a minority. So for all the oppression, the nation is recognizing that this minority has the right to exercise his symbolic speech of not standing for the national anthem for whatever cause he wants. So I don't question his right. I question his intelligence. I question his reasoning, because he's coming off as a hypocrite, really. He's an extremely privileged person talking about oppression.
Right. Well, what nationality is Colin Kaepernick?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's not really fully known or disclosed publicly, as far as I know. He was adopted. His adoptive parents are white Americans. I assume that's where the Kaepernick name comes from.
Okay.
Just from appearance and things I've read, there's some African American ancestry. There might be some other ancestry, but it's hard to tell, and I don't know that it's ever been publicly disclosed. But he does have some minority ancestry. But he was raised by white adoptive parents, which is another interesting thing, because he's basically saying that white America is horrible and oppressive to minorities. So I'm wondering, when he sits down at the dinner table with mom and dad, what exactly he tells them about their horrible white privilege.
Dead silence there for a moment.
Well, I thought you were going to run with that ball there for a second.
I needed the cricket sound, and I couldn't. The sound plant's not working on this. It's sound plant is completely borked on my computer right now as I was reaching for it. I'm not sure about the guy. I mean, I really wish that he had just said, I'm not going to stand for the national anthem because everyone expects me to stand. But he's saying he doesn't like the way blacks are being treated, and frankly, I don't like the way blacks are being treated.
Well, that's an interesting thing. That's a narrative that is being sold to us by the media.
For sure.
That somehow there is this horrible, horrible treatment of minorities and black people in the United States. And that it's really not that true. Of course there's going to be prejudice. That's going to exist. People are still going to make jokes about Asian drivers, and there's going to be things that are going to be ethnically insensitive based on people's religion or their sexuality or their ethnic minority status. That's always going to happen. Now, as to whether it's institutionalized and this huge oppression, it doesn't really exist. It's getting sensationalized, primarily by groups like Black Lives Matter, which are taking visible, shootings and things like that from police versus black suspect incidents, and they're trying to turn that into saying, they're killing blacks in the street and they're stacking them up like cordwood. Well, that's not happening.
No.
Primarily,
there are statistics that the number of black people that are killed in the year by black people are much higher than those by police.
That's correct. And here's another interesting statistic. If you flip it over to the police side, a police officer is 4 times more likely to be murdered in the line of duty by an African American male than by any other minority or gender out there while they're doing their job. So it raises the question, what is causing this problem? And this is going back to some of the logic fallacies, this is a correlation versus causation issue.
Right.
So the question is, what is causing this problem within the black community where, a black male is 4 times more dangerous to a police officer than anybody else? Is that causing the police to then have to arrest, enforce, or deal with that aspect of violence? What's coming first, the chicken or the egg kind of concept? Some people say that it's poverty driven. That the black communities they don't get as good of an education opportunity. There's the school to prison pipeline that gets talked about I don't necessarily agree that that's a case,
Well,
but
well,
those are some of the reasons asserted.
there was a very compelling article that I read in Seattle. I think it was the local Seattle paper a long time ago, maybe in 2003 or 2002. And the headline grabbed me. It was like, "My son will probably end up in prison." And it went into the statistics about how 1 in 3 black men in the country were in prison, and what that meant to like a teenage black guy growing up, knowing that amongst his friends, depending on where you live, like one of your friends is going to end up dead, or 2 or 3 of your friends are going to end up in prison, and how that shapes their mind and their behavior towards police, towards the quote, the system. I mean, this has been going on since the projects, since we started separating black families, keeping the men away from them, which Dave has the theory that was all Democrat based.
Well, it's
early
actually,
on, but
it's actually an interesting thing, because if you go into the history of the political parties, prior to the civil rights movement in the 60s, all of the what you might call institutional anti-African American laws and attitudes were all from the Democrat Party.
right.
All the Jim Crow laws, all the standing at the steps of the university, not letting them in. That was all
Those are
Democrats.
for sure.
That was all Democrats. What ended up happening, it kind of started back with the New Deal and FDR, but it really hit its stride under Lyndon Johnson,
Okay.
where Lyndon Johnson had envisioned the Great Society, and he brought out a lot of social programs. And he actually was pretty famous, and I won't give his quote, but basically he inferred that if he gave away enough stuff, that he could have black people voting Democrat for the next 50 years. And he was right.
Wow.
Because whether that was the cause, whether it's because he gave this free stuff, but from that point, African American voting Democrat, it's 90+% ever since, without a doubt. So they got recruited to the Democrats. And that could have been from Johnson's war on poverty and the Great Society, and we've thrown a ton of money at black communities. And I don't think that has helped the poverty problem or helped their self-respect or self-reliance one bit. And that's the problem. And it goes back
Right.
to the giving a person a fish versus teaching them to fish.
Okay.
The idea being, if you teach somebody to fish, if you give them self-respect and you give them the skills to succeed, they will succeed.
Right.
If you just give them the fish, they'll eat the fish, and next day they'll ask for another fish. So, throwing money at the poverty problem, I don't know that works. I don't know that that's the solution. But once you start throwing money, you can't shut off the spigot, because then you get the outrage and cry like, "Oh, you're trying to kill the black community by cutting off our entitlements."
Right. Cutting off all our programs.
Right, and the money we need to survive and get ourselves out of poverty. Well, it hasn't happened. Something is wrong with the basic approach. Now, I don't have all the answers, but there is something wrong with the basic approach. There's something wrong with the leadership in the black community, because the leaders of the black community are coaching them into perpetual victimhood status rather than empowering them to succeed in the world that exists.
Yeah, victimhood is a trap that I think many people can fall into. But I'm going to remind the audience that I teach in a community college, so I get many students that are a mix from right out of high school or coming back from a career to sort of update their skills, or maybe reclassify towards more in the area that I'm teaching in digital media and audio and recording. And it's pretty clear a lot of the younger people, in my very limited experience, and I know this is falling quickly into a fallacy of low numbers argument. But I can see, and by discussing with other professors, there's a very victim mentality, like, oh, this stuff happens to me. It's always bad like this. I can never get ahead because they won't do this for me or they won't give this to me. There's always some kind of an excuse rather than saying, here I am, this is my life, and this is how it's going to be, and then taking action. So is Colin Kaepernick a victim, or is he trying to take action right now?
I think he perceives himself in the status of a victim. So he on the one hand, he'll say that he's personally blessed. He actually has acknowledged that, because he makes millions of dollars and he's a pro quarterback and all that. But he identifies with that as overcoming the victimhood that he would otherwise face, I guess is the way he looks at it. Now, I'm curious, in your dealing with the students both returning to school and the ones fresh out of high school, are you noticing a difference between what would be the millennial generation or the younger ones and the Generation X, which would be my generation, that would be coming back and taking some classes?
The students that are coming back that are usually closer to my age, around 40 or older, are always 100% involved in the class. They read and learn and do everything. They participate. They are part of the conversation, and they get the most out of the class.
And, part of that might be age and experience. I mean, on the one hand, it's difficult to make a comparison and say, well, the millennials, they're more spoiled than Generation X was. Well, to some degree, you're looking at Generation X after they've had 20 years of life experience.
Right.
And they know a little bit different about coming back to school versus, people getting their first toe in the water, so to speak.
Well,
but there is. Yeah. Go ahead.
I wouldn't say that the younger students that are coming right out of high school or in their first couple years are necessarily any different than the older students were 20 years ago. It's just that some of those students are coming back saying, you know what, I've raised a family, I've had these great jobs, and now I want to do something more. Or another guy, he came back and he said, my friends have been telling me for years to get into this voiceover career, and I can't put these pieces together. By the end of the semester, so oftentimes those guys will come in like they want to be able to do one thing.
Very interesting.
And they may not tell me that thing, but sometimes they'll tell me at the end, like, you know what, I got this together. I'll get those messages or Facebook or email like a semester or a year later. Hey, by the way, man, I've been making this career doing this whole thing. I never knew how to do this, but I'm so glad we did that. So I can't say that when I was 17 and in college with a music scholarship that I was paying any more attention to my classes than any 17-year-old now.
Well, the interesting thing, because we've got a grand social experiment ongoing, and we're going to find out in the next 20 years the results of that experiment. And basically, the millennials who are in college and entering the workforce today is the entire generation that was raised by soccer moms, taught not to keep score in games. Everybody wins. Everybody gets a participation trophy. Parents had them signed up in taekwondo, music lessons, soccer camp, volleyball camp. They were filled with so many different things to do. This was the generation of the helicopter parents, where parents were very involved in always overseeing and taking you to all these activities and everything that you had to do.
I got to tell you, in Orange County today, it's not any better. My kids have friends that they've already lost by the age of 9, have already lost friends because the kid has zero free time until 2 weeks in July, the 2 weeks that he isn't on vacation with his family. because every Saturday is Little League or soccer or basketball. Then he's got his Sunday church and his Sunday afternoon Bible study, and every school day is homework, followed up by a sports practice, followed up by a martial art, followed up by tutoring. And literally the 8-9-year-olds are booked 14 hours a day, even more booked than I am. And it's taken you and me 3 weeks to get together to do this phone call.
Well, it's funny because this was the reaction to some of the experiences of the generation prior, where they felt a little lost. They felt that the world was ultra competitive, and that losing too much and too often was just disheartening, and you needed more time with mom and dad and you didn't get enough. So in reaction, we went 100% the other way, and
Right.
we filled them with activities. This was supposed to make them this super generation that had incredible skills because they did everything, and yet they were so kind and tolerant because they never kept score and they loved everybody. And we missed out on the fact that the whiner effect, where we have a generation of whiners when they don't have somebody leading them around or giving them a participation trophy. So we have to see how it's going to come out.
Well, I'll tell you, we're doing our best in college to break the whiners.
Yeah, and it's
a concerted effort among those of us who are willing to go to professional development, who go and take and further our own education as educators, learning techniques and science behind creating environments for people to learn. And oftentimes it's, here you go, Rob, this is what I need you to accomplish. And then there's no hand holding, and you might fail.
Here's an interesting thing. To some degree, I don't know if it was planned or just coincidental, but this kind of raising our kids under this hand-holding kind of concept fits right into the Democratic Party principles. Why was Bernie Sanders an actual socialist, although he would describe himself as a democratic socialist, but there's functionally no difference. Socialist is a socialist. Why was he so popular with millennials? Because socialism at its core creates the government to be your parent.
Right.
The government will lead you around. The government will take care of all these things. The government will set everything up. The government will plan things for you, from your health care to your employment to your, it's this big intangible parent. And if you're raised always being kind of told what to do, always being led around to all these activities, and
that's what
and
you're
everybody
used to.
everybody gets the fair share. Everybody gets a participation trophy. So that's almost sort of, you're almost taking the win in a game and redistributing it to everybody so that everybody gets the win.
Right.
But it's sort of a watered down win because nobody actually
wins.
Right. Nobody gets the big win. They all get this watered down participation version. And that's basically athletic socialism.
Well, I'll tell you, I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and I am sorry that Bernie wasn't competitive enough to beat out all of the underhanded dealings within the DNC.
I agree, and I don't understand why. I happen to be more on the right side rather than the left side of things, but I don't understand why the Democrats support Hillary Clinton. When they see that the dirty tricks from the Democratic Party to make sure she was the nominee, they should have flocked to Sanders. I'm not a Sanders supporter, but at least he is a bit more honest about his principles and his ideals,
Right.
and he wasn't the dirty tricks guy. Not any more than any other politician. I mean, he's still a politician, but he's nothing like the dirty tricks Clinton has and will continue to pull.
Well,
I would rather have Sanders running.
Well, Bernie Sanders was trying to tackle two of what are probably our current generation's biggest problems, which is the completely corrupt and out of control healthcare system, which the Affordable Care Act is now such an insurance scam that nobody can even afford to be on it anymore. In fact, nobody that's healthy or without a chronic problem under the age of 60 should even pay for healthcare. They should just pay the fine, because that is causing $600 EpiPens because of this monopoly. And the other problem is the crippling debt we have from student loans. This ever increasing, it's a cycle. In the 60s, you could go to college for free, but then the government gives some money to the colleges for a program, and they want them to hire somebody to manage the program. So they have an employee that can never leave and has to retire and be paid forever. And so they have to get more grants, which hire more employees. We're going to give you $2 million for 2 years. Oh, you need to hire a director and staff and all these 30 people to go with it. So the colleges, from the community colleges to the CSUs to the UCs to the private schools, get bigger and bigger and cost more and more money. So a student comes out with so much debt that a college student going to a UC can no longer go out and just start a business. We have the least entrepreneurial generation right now today than we've had in the history of our country.
Who can afford to take that risk and the amount of time that it takes to build a business from scratch and turn it into a profitable enterprise?
Right.
Not when your loans come calling, a couple months after you graduate. It's not very feasible for the average person. Well, and I think you and I have discussed this before, and I agree with you entirely. You actually have some more insight on some of the programs and things, but in the general concept, it's partly the government's fault, because the more money you make available, and the more special loans and government guaranteed loans you make available, so that the actual financial aid package that a student can get gets bigger and bigger, well, the colleges will take it. They'll just raise their prices to match the amount of money available, because they're not stupid. Why leave money on the table? That's what the colleges are thinking. We can build a new wing and attract more students and things of that nature. It becomes where they've taken the cash student, the self-funded student, out of the picture.
Right.
You either take financial aid or you don't go.
And I think this literally happened, it got worse over the last 14 years. Because when I went to grad school at CSU Los Angeles, it was $800 a quarter. So $2,400 for the year for full-time grad program, 2 years. So it was a little more than $800. Let's just round it to $1,000 with student fees and cost or whatever. That's still $6,000 for my grad program. And then I just had to find a way to live and buy books. And that's a whole separate thing. Books were like $400 per quarter also. But that's a different cost. The same program now is $3,000 for the semester.
Oh, the greatest thing too is I happen to be taking 2 courses right now, physics and astronomy. And the great thing is they make you sign up for these online test applications and textbook, that the online application, just so I can take the tests required for the course, is more than the tuition for the course.
Oh, man.
There's a little bit of insanity to that.
That's
the
rough.
Books right now, because I'm taking it at a community college, the books and materials cost more than the tuition, which
That's
is
just insane. Now we could really go down the rabbit hole on this whole college subject, and we're just getting into the fall semester 2016. In fact, my classes start in they start Thursday evening, so I'll be in there teaching. But I'd like to circle back to our logical fallacies. And one of the
excellent
things,
idea.
When we talked, when we were off pod, we didn't really get into any subjects of anything, but I wanted to find out what you had on your mind. That's what got us to the Colin Kaepernick not standing up, which I support him standing up. I just wish he was utilizing his power for good. But then you brought up this interesting article that I think it got under your skin, and it's 9 foods that are harder to buy than a gun from the Mike Network, Mike.com.
Yes, Mike.com. It's mic.com. And just to give some disclaimers, if you've never seen Mike.com, apparently it's run by the left wing of the Democratic Party. So it's a very, very liberal slant. When it first started, it used to be called Policy Mike.
Okay.
And it would feature, and that's when I first subscribed to it. It would feature, it was a little slanted left, but you'd have 3 or 4 left slanted articles, and then you could get 1 or 2 right slant articles, and it had sort of a balanced approach. The idea was contributors would become editors and moderators, and they would print these articles. But in the last, it's about 10 years that or maybe 8 that I've been looking at it. It did away with the whole right side, and it's completely far left now.
Okay. So before we get into why this peeves you off so much, I want to state that I'm a pro-food person. I definitely think that people should be able to eat a variety of things. If you can catch it, bake it, cook it, grind it, you should be able to eat it. Even if I don't agree with you, you should be able to eat it. And on the other side of this, I'm also pro-guns. You should be able to go and buy a gun and protect yourself and your home. I want people to be trained. I certainly have been through training. You've been through training just from our service. I definitely want people to have access to firearms to protect themselves in case the government goes crazy, tries to implement something. It will probably never happen in our lifetime, but I'm almost a federalist in this case. I want us to be able to protect our rights, as we say, if the shit hits the fan.
Oh, I agree entirely. And as the disclaimer, I am a huge Second Amendment advocate. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I certainly don't think we need more gun control. I think we need to stick to the laws that were on the books and actually enforce it. Most of the gun control measures would be ineffective against the problems that people think that they would be there to protect.
Now,
control measures aren't going to stop mass shootings and all these other things that people think. But
are you currently a member of any militia?
Not a militia. I am a member of the California State Military Reserve, which is under the California Department of the Military, and is an adjunct of the National Guard.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you continuing to fight for our right to bear arms. So, do you want me to read off this list? The number 1 here? Because I don't even know what this is. This food item here.
Yeah, we could back and forth it a little here. It's pretty interesting. You found the article.
I did. I don't know how you want to handle it, but I brought it up like I don't even know what a cronut is.
Well, apparently a cronut is a very tasty pastry, which is a cross between a croissant and a donut.
Okay.
So they call it a cronut, and it's some New York City baker, pastry wizard they call him, came up with it, and he's the only guy who does it or something, and so you can actually wait in line for a couple hours or 2.5, 3 hours to get a cronut.
Okay.
So the point of slide number 1 is they have a cronut listed, and they say wait time 150 minutes. And then they have a gun picture, and they say wait time 0 minutes.
Well, that's not true. It takes me 30 days to buy a gun here in California.
Well, exactly. They're trying to say it's easier to get a gun than to get a cronut because of the wait time. Well, in California, as in most other states, there's a wait time of at least 10 days from the time you seek to purchase your firearm before you can actually get it. Mm-hmm. You also have to take a firearm safety exam that you have to pass. I don't think there's a cronut safety exam that you have to pass. You also have to be over the age of 18 to purchase a gun. or it might be, is it 21? I think it's 21 actually. Over the age of 21, you don't have to, there's no age requirement for a cronut. You have to get a background check to purchase a firearm. No background check required for the cronut. So again, it's this false equivalency that somehow the wait time, because you might have to wait in line for hours to get a cronut, made it harder to get than a gun. Again, it's so batshit ridiculous, the comparison they make, that it throws their reasoning into false light. But you'll have people walking around, I'm sure, going, "Oh, geez, we need gun control. You can't even buy a cronut. I mean, you could get a gun easier than a cronut." And
now, if I had a gun, I bet I could get a cronut right away.
I bet that would speed up the wait time for the cronut.
And honestly, the cross between a croissant and a donut is probably more deadly to Americans than guns are, and they should probably have greater and more rigorous controls on them.
There is a long-term effect there. So my idea, I mean, if you actually had a wait time of 0 minutes to get a gun, I bet if you went and got the gun first and then went down the street to get a cronut, I bet you could cut your wait time on the cronut to
Right.
0 if you went and got the gun first.
Well, that's what I was saying. All right. Now, number 2 is something that I would love to try, and that's the Pappy Van Winkle. This is a whiskey that you just can't get.
Yeah, and the idea of it is that they're saying, there's only 7,000 bottles of this whiskey, this very elite whiskey made each year, but it's easier to get a gun because 11 million guns are purchased each year. But again, you still have that same thing of, there's no background check to get whiskey, and really it's a little bit of a false comparison because you're taking a particular special brand of whiskey with a limited selection. You're not saying it's easier to get a gun than it is to get a bottle of whiskey, which is a more accurate comparison. You're saying, no, it's this special whiskey. Well, okay, why not compare it then to a special handmade, signed by the gunsmith, limited edition, only 7,000 produced gun versus the whiskey?
Well, and not only are they picking a special whiskey, but Pappy Van Winkle specifically was robbed last year. $100,000 worth of Pappy Van Winkle. I think it was 17 barrels, 20 cases of their bottles were stolen in a big semi truck. This is a big ring in Kentucky, and when they recovered it, they just destroyed it all. So for the next 10 years, Pappy Van Winkle is going to be on short supply while the family starts to rebuild their inventory because they have a lengthy process to keep their supply up.
That's actually very interesting. So I'm a little curious too. So I'm looking it up.
Okay. It's a good thing we have Google on the show.
Yeah.
I came across Pappy Van Winkle and this whole story because one person at one bar had recommended to me that it was as good as any whiskey they've ever had. And I asked somebody else about it, and he just laughed and said, "No, you're not going to get that."
Okay, so here's an interesting statistic. So if you do the comparison, and you don't say, no, this special whiskey, if you just say as a food item, whiskey. I don't know if it's a food item, but I kind of chew on my whiskey a little bit.
Yep.
Well, okay, so 11 million guns are made each year. Even considering just Scotch, they make 99 million cases of Scotch per year. That's not all whiskeys. That doesn't include Irish whiskey and bourbon and everything else. That's just Scotch. And it's 99 million cases, which 12 bottles per case.
And let me tell you, you can buy Scotch, bourbon, whiskey, rye at any store, any gas station, anywhere.
Right. So, you're talking about 120 million bottles of Scotch versus 11 million guns. Really no comparison.
So,
So, yes, I reject number 2. Oh, and the other one, too, was something about to have this whiskey, have to be willing to spend hundreds of dollars on a single bottle of liquor. Well,
A gun.
most guns are hundreds of dollars, so I don't see where it's easier.
Okay. Now,
And then
oh, go ahead.
number 3, they say a martini. This one really inflamed me because they said must be 21 to purchase. But then on the gun side, they say gun, children can own. Well, children can own a martini. You still have to be of the right age to purchase it.
Right.
But as soon as I purchase that martini, I could leave it sitting around in my house and the children could own the martini. They could walk around with it and say, hey, look at my martini.
Now, in California, you can buy a shotgun or a rifle at 18. 18-year-old is not a child. 18 is an adult.
Exactly.
And you can buy a handgun at 21. So to be James Bond, you really have to be 21.
Well, the interesting thing on that is, and this goes off into the weeds a little bit, when they speak of gun control and gun deaths and things like that, they always talk about the number of children killed by guns.
Mm-hmm.
They always lump 18 and 19-year-olds into that because they're still teens.
Right.
So they'll always say, children and teens or something like that. Or they just lump them all in as children, and they sort of neglect the fact that the statistics include 18 and 19-year-olds. And for that matter, a 17-year-old gang member, that's not what I think of when I think of some poor innocent child being slain in a firearm death.
Right. But don't we leave it to the courts to decide at the time when a 17-year-old gang member is convicted? Don't we sort of trust the legal process to say this guy was actually acting as an adult and we're going to convict him as such?
Yeah, actually, well, there's a process in the courts whereby a juvenile can be certified as an adult for crimes that are sufficiently violent and terrible enough, which actually brings up a totally different point that I completely disagree with that practice, because you can't go out and prove to the courts that you're a particularly responsible 15-year-old, so you should be able to vote and buy liquor. But if you're a 15-year-old that goes out and commits a crime, we can certify you as an adult. So on the one hand, we're saying your mind's not fully developed and you don't have the ability to be an adult, so we're not going to treat you like one, unless, of course, you do something bad. Then we're going to treat you like an adult. I just reject that as being logically inconsistent.
Now, without going too far astray, before we get to number 4 here, when I was 16, I went through a process in California to become an emancipated minor, which meant I was legally able to act on my own accord as an adult, but I still was not able to vote, drink alcohol, or purchase a gun.
Correct. You were an adult for the primary purpose of being able to enter in and be bound by a contract.
Yep.
It prevented a contract from being voided because you lacked the capacity to consent to a contract. It also would not have affected you if you hooked up with some 35-year-old woman. She could still be convicted of statutory rape even though you were an emancipated minor.
All right.
So,
that's interesting. Good legal point there.
Little things that, nope, you didn't actually get all the privileges of adulthood.
So, we'll leave 35-year-old women out of this and go on to food stamps.
Who doesn't like 35-year-old women, though?
Depends on how old you are, sir.
Well,
you can leave that out. Tell me about food stamps.
Oh, yeah, number 4. So, the whole premise of this was that there were foods that were harder to purchase than a gun, and then they put food stamps.
Okay.
Well, nobody's sitting down and slicing their food stamp into bite-sized pieces so that they can consume it.
No, so let's skip that one then.
So again, it's another false equivalency that they're trying to put there.
Right.
Okay. The next one was raw milk.
Okay. Raw milk, it's not legal for you to purchase in the state of California.
Right. And and it's only legal in apparently 13 states. And then they, of course, they put gun legal in all 50 states.
Okay. Now, raw milk, some of the listeners may already know this, they may not. Raw milk is milk that has not been pasteurized. Pasteurization, and I had to look this up because, we're all health freaks over here in California, is a process where they heat the milk up to kill bacteria in it. And there's some argument that you lose some of the nutritional value also.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Now, here's one where I don't actually want to go on record as agreeing with the article in any way. But theoretically, you can't obtain, in California, you can't obtain the raw milk legally. Now, does that mean it's actually easier or harder to buy than a gun? Well, there's a lot of things that aren't legal that you can actually get easier than you can get a gun. I don't know if they sell raw milk in Arizona or Nevada or anything like that.
You can go to any farm or any farmer that you know, and if you can convince them that you're not a federal agent, they'll just sell you raw milk for cash.
Right.
Here, I got this off my cow this morning.
So again, and of course, the other thing is, if you're in a state, one of the 13 states where it's legal, the comparison is completely ridiculous because you could just go out and buy it.
Right.
But the other thing is, I think it's wrong for the government to come in and say, no, you can't buy raw milk because we're smarter than you are and we think it's dangerous to your health and you're too stupid to make your own decisions, so we're going to outlaw raw milk. I think that's stupid. I
think people are too stupid to make their own food decisions. That's
right,
and we should outlaw McDonald's. We should outlaw the foods that are specifically killing us. Should actually have some limitations on them because people aren't educated enough to know, oh, hey, guess what? Sugar is killing you. You're all dying of diabetes and heart disease, and we don't want that to happen. So raw milk bringing E. coli to people because it isn't being processed correctly, I think in this case, I'm going to side with regulation.
Well, I respect your point on that. I also respectfully dissent because I'm, on mine, I'm a liberty guy. Mm-hmm. I think most of the things, why the government has this special power or authority to make this decision and then impose it on you, it also begs the question of where do they stop? If they say, well, we think sugar's bad for you, so we're going to outlaw sugar. We think this is bad for you, and we're going to outlaw that. And sometimes they'll make these rules based on bad junk science, and we suffer for it because we don't get to research and make our own choices. What if it ends up being something you like and think is an integral part of your diet?
Well,
also,
it's different.
What's wrong with labeling?
Well, it's different when it's 1-to-1. If you were a farmer and all of us neighbors came over to you to buy our milk and our eggs, well, maybe there's a couple hundred people that you're impacting locally that we're getting our milk and our eggs from. And if anything weird were to happen, you could actually probably come and let us know what's happening. But if you're selling to millions and millions of people and then 1,000 children die or become permanently blinded or injured, where does that responsibility fall? So I wasn't looking in the pure philosophical case of should you be able to sell me raw milk? I think you should. Should I be able to purchase raw milk of my own free will? Yes, I should. But
what I would be
to go to millions of people is different.
Well, what I would be see, to me, a hand-to-hand transaction between one person to another person, you're dealing with questions of scale. If it's legal for one, it should be legal for all. If I can sell it to you, I should be able to sell it to everyone. My idea is just do labeling. Put a big label. They want to put skull and crossbones on cigarettes. We sell cigarettes. Mm-hmm. Are cigarettes not more dangerous probably than raw milk? So just put a big skull and crossbones on the raw milk that says, may be harmful to your health, and we, the government, completely don't endorse raw milk because of this, this, and this. But hey, if you have a death wish and you want to buy raw milk, here it is. Okay, so you got a big warning label, but if you really want it, it's not a huge segment of the population that's out there gagging for raw milk. If you really, really want it, go get it.
Right.
You know,
Go get it.
Make them put a big label on it. That's fine.
All right. So Girl Scout cookies.
Oh yeah, this one peeved me off because I actually kind of think it would be cool if Girl Scouts would come by 8 weeks out of the year, by my house, ring the doorbell, and offer to sell me a gun. I think that would be just awesome. So, really, it just takes a lot out of it because when they show up at your door, you almost feel guilty not buying it. So, I'd be forced to buy a gun just, to help support these Girl Scouts. So, again, the ridiculousness of, guns have background checks and age requirements. They don't deliver them to your door by nice, friendly preteens smiling with their moms, with a wagon full of guns coming up to your house. It's kind of a ridiculous comparison.
All right, just the completionist in me, without dragging this out too long, because we're already starting to go a little long. I just want to touch
we'll speed it up.
I want to touch on the next couple ones. The next one is a Kinder Surprise egg. Now, I went to Italy last year on vacation, and I bought home a ton of these Kinder Surprise eggs because they are illegal they're illegal in the U.S. I think the entire United States, certainly in California. Because there's chocolate and then inside is this giant plastic thing. There's like a very little chocolate around a giant plastic thing, and inside the plastic thing is a cool toy that my kids loved. There's no way you could choke on this. It's ridiculous. Maybe in the 70s you could have.
Well, they banned them apparently in 1938. So, again, that's probably one of those laws that just nobody ever went back and revisited as to whether, this is should be banned or maybe just put that little warning choking hazard like they put on everything else, like board games that have small plastic pieces. Warning, choking hazard.
Yep. Now, haggis. Tell me about haggis.
Oh, haggis is the food of the gods. A little salty if they don't prepare it right, but basically it's kind of like a sausage.
Isn't it a sheep lung?
Traditional haggis would be a sheep's stomach stuffed with seasoned and spiced meat and barley.
Like the liver and the heart.
No,
the lung.
Not necessarily organ meat. Just meat.
Okay, I thought it was all organ meat.
No. It's like ground beef. Sort of think of it as it's kind of like a thicker, little saltier sausage in essence. Because a natural sausage is going to be have an intestine skin as the casing. Right. Modern haggis, it doesn't always have an actual sheep's stomach as the casing. They have artificial casings, just like sausages and hot dogs do. It's why they don't make it available in the United States is just silly.
It's a spicy sheep sausage. All right, haggis. I'm going to have to go to Scotland, and during my Scotch tour, when I go to drink whiskey made in Scotland, I'll have to have some haggis.
You have to. It's really good. I enjoyed it. I have the Scottish ancestry, so it was really great. And of course, if you've ever seen Highlander, and there's the part where
that's what I was going to say.
Christopher Lambert refers to Sean Connery as a stupid haggis, and then Sean Connery goes, "Haggis? What is that?" So it's just a food.
Okay, and number 9, which my wife just had a couple weeks ago at a fine restaurant near the house, Chilean sea bass.
So she walked into a restaurant, didn't have to show ID, get a background check, proof of age, and she was actually able to get some dangerous Chilean sea bass?
She just looked at the menu. She said, "Oh, I'd like the Chilean sea bass, please." And then they brought it, and she ate it.
What is this country coming to? We need Chilean sea bass control.
Right? I don't understand.
I don't get it. So I guess the wrap-up of that is, this is why the article was so ridiculous to me, because it's like those internet memes where they put something pithy and completely untrue half truths on one little picture, and then the stupid people of the world go out and repeat it. And I hate people that are misinformed.
Well,
I think they should be informed.
There is one point about the, like, you think, like, obviously to me, the author of this, a lot of this is tongue in cheek. I don't think they're trying to make a big social statement. I think they're just trying to be silly and make some headlines, get a bunch of clicks, and maybe this was like a light afternoon article for them. But I think what happens, because people really don't understand science, they don't understand statistics, and we're caught in this, in like the news telling us propaganda. And I mean that literally, like literal government propaganda is in the news. It's because it's legal. We read something like this, not you and I, but people on Facebook, and then they believe it's true. And they don't do any further research. They don't question it. And then you'll say, well, it's easier to buy a gun than it is to, like, what? What are you talking about? Where did that come from? And you find out it's some stupid article that doesn't have any disclaimers that people just posted on Facebook and read. And that is dangerous.
100% correct. It's a perfect example. You realize they actually did a survey about it, and it was surprising. I don't have the survey, so I can't quote all the statistics, but it was surprising how many people got their actual news and information from comedy shows or comedians like Bill Maher or The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. And they're just making fun of stuff, and people were using that as their primary source of information. And they, the sarcasm and the tongue-in-cheek part is somehow lost on them. They walk away thinking they've gotten a bit of hard news.
Well,
so
there's always been a segment of the population that believed The Onion was real news. Now,
you beat me to it. I was going to reference The Onion.
Now, The Onion years ago posted an article when I think it was the Gillette shaver went to 2 blades, and they were like, fuck it, we're going to 5 blades. And everybody thought this was just the most ridiculous thing, and The Onion, funny, ha, 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 except that it came true.
Yeah, that's actually when satire becomes reality is just particularly noteworthy. But there's a number of those sites. The Onion's the most famous one, but I will see on Facebook all the time people will repost, and they miss the fine print at the bottom of the article that they reposted that it's a satire site, and it sneaks up on them.
Well, it's interesting times we live in.
How much time do we have left, or are we like blown past it?
Well,
here?
I think we're sort of at the end of what a reasonable person might listen to on this fine conversation. And I think we should wrap up this conversation, get this out for the people. And then if we get a little bit of feedback, maybe we can get together again in a couple weeks and continue this conversation about current events and ranting and maybe digging in a little bit to what's happening. I mean, we're about to have a white national supremacist as president of the United States of America.
Well, just so people don't think that I'm entirely a stuck in the mud, rant-worthy individual, I'll throw out something of entertainment value.
Okay.
I turned off my TV and cable, so I don't get anything like that. Everything I get is through like Netflix or Amazon Prime or some other source that's either low cost or free. So I stumbled on Netflix show called Marco Polo and watched a couple seasons of it.
Well, incidentally, that is in HDR and 4K. So if you happen to have a brand new television, that might be the most beautiful looking video you can watch in existence today on any streaming service.
Oh, very cool.
I only watched it in 1080, so please continue.
But I just wanted to recommend the show. It has certain flaws to it.
Like story?
Well, it has what I call the modern love for the woman warrior. That they make women into these ridiculously powerful warriors that can defeat 30 and 40 men at a sitting because they're just that skilled. Sorry to do a dose of reality. that doesn't happen.
I'll say I also enjoyed Marco Polo. The visuals were great. I really enjoyed the fighting. Was like any good kung fu show. They had really good choreography, great sets, good costumes, and I like they brought in just enough history to make me go and search Wikipedia and go say, did that really happen? And find out that in many cases it actually did.
Yeah, there's, it's historically based. It's a bit of fiction, but you get actually some really cool landscapes and kind of a sense of that. The Mongol horde of Genghis Khan was not fully just a horde. It wasn't just all these ratty Mongols roaming the. They would set up cities, and they ruled part of China, and then a huge chunk of the world. So it's really interesting, some good history part. And the fighting, it's a little Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon a bit, but it's well choreographed and it's entertaining and fun. And some of the actors, unfortunately not the guy who plays Marco Polo, some of the actors are really awesome. The guy who plays Kublai Khan is fantastic. The guy's awesome.
I would like to recommend, since we're recommending Netflix and wrapping this up, on Netflix there's a show called Longmire, and it's based on the Walter Longmire mysteries. Longmire is a sheriff in Wyoming that has a neighboring Cheyenne tribal reservation. So there's interesting politics between the Native Americans, the Cheyenne Nation, and the local, the white man, and this intense friendship, lifelong friendship between Walt and his good friend. So the white sheriff and the red man, the Cheyenne, and it started off with one episode, one and done mystery. But now by season 3, they're sort of tying these these plots across multiple episodes, and it's really compelling. It's like, we got to get another Longmire in. Oh, I'm going to miss that tonight.
I have to agree with you entirely on that. I've watched a good bit of Longmire. My mom watches Longmire, and she's 82. Yeah, 82, and she watches Longmire religiously. But yeah, there's some great characters, and the acting is good. You get Katie Sackhoff from previously of Battlestar Galactica, is a great character. Lou Diamond Phillips, a very acclaimed actor, plays one of the Cheyenne, one of the natives in the show, and he's a great actor. And the guy who plays Walt, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but really good, and the show is put together, and now that it has longer story arcs, I think it's only improved. And those are our picks of the week.
And they make me want to buy a Ram pickup truck. So Rob, if our listeners want to get a hold of you, other than sending me a message to forward along, because I'm a terrible secretary, by the way, how can they get a hold of you?
I can always be reached. Since I'm a practicing attorney, my email is not confidential, so you can just email me at my regular email because it's a business email. It's robert@englishlaw.us. Feel free to comment or make snide remarks on that email, or give praise either way. Or even if you have a legal problem in question and you might need services, I'll take that info as well.
Okay, Southern California people, Rob's available. And again, I'm Sable Cantus here in Orange County, California. I want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Indispensable Thursday Show. These episodes are going to be intermittent, so don't unsubscribe from the feed. But keep an eye out for our upcoming podcast, What's This Movie Really About? At whatsthismoviereallyabout.com. We have some really fun and interesting episodes lined up for you. So at that, I guess we're going to say thanks for joining, Rob.
Great. I loved it. Always like being on the show, and thanks to the audience.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Indispensable Thursday Show. You can subscribe on iTunes and anywhere that fine podcasts are served. Join us on our Facebook page or send us a tweet to @SableandDave.